Hello wonderful people, it is Genevieve, and in this video we're going to draw some decorative mistletoe borders. So open up your favorite drawing app and let's get started. And I will be using my pastel and chalk brushes from the pastel and chalk brush set, which I will link in the description below along with a promo code. And it includes this pre-textured chalkboard file. So if you do have the set, go ahead and open it. Otherwise just change the color of your background to a dark charcoal. And you're going to start by, as usual, creating a new layer, and this one we're going to rename it to Leaves 1. And I've included a color palette which will also be linked in the description below. It is totally free. It is on Patreon though, but it is set as a public post, so you don't have to be a patron to get it. So feel free to go get it if you want. Otherwise, just pick a nice bright green that you like that is fairly pale. You're also going to pick a nice textured brush. So if you have the pastel and chalk brush set, go and pick the hard chalk. Otherwise, you can go with the dry ink from the inking panel. And you're going to start by just pretty much mapping out where you want your branches to be. And the thing about mistletoes is the branches are kind of like Y-shaped. So they always divide in two. The thing with two is that it doesn't look really good. You know, there's this thing called the rule of three, where you want to have basically a number of items that is not divisible by two. It just looks more pleasing to the eye. So we're kind of going to cheat. I know it's not exactly how mistletoe is, but try to have at least an uneven number of leaves. So when you map out, you start with your Y shape and then you just add a few extra leaves here and there, so it looks a bit better. And don't be afraid to have a leaf that pokes out of the bottom part or the side of your canvas and that is not attached to anything. Once you've mapped out your leaf, go ahead and select a darker version of your green and make your brush smaller, because you're just going to want to draw a central line in the center of your leaves. You can see here I was not really happy with how dark I went, so I'm actually going to select an even darker version of that green and go back over, which in the end resulted in something really cool because there's just a little bit more happening within the leaf because there were a few lines in the middle. Great, so this was honestly the hardest part. Now all you're going to do is create a new layer that this one you're going to rename to Leaves 2. And you're basically going to do the same thing, just with a different color. So believe it or not, this time we're going to go with a very light blue, so kind of a teal color, not necessarily blue, but more blue than green. And you're going to do the same thing. So you're just going to map out where you want your branches to be. You're going to split them in Y shapes, and then you're going to add some very round, thin leaves at the ends. And you're going to just add a few more so that it's not an even number of leaves, so it just looks a bit better. And just like for this first set of leaf, you're going to pick a darker version of your color and make your brush smaller and just add a center line to make it a bit more interesting. Now this is looking pretty good already, but it looks a bit bare. So we're gonna add some pine needles and pine branches kind of in between the leaves. So go ahead and create a new layer and put it below your leaves, and this one you're going to rename to Pine. You're then going to pick a dark green, but careful not too dark. I'm going way too dark and you'll see in a second. Well, actually you won't see because it's just too dark. But don't worry, I noticed really soon that there was no way this camera was picking up the difference in color between the background and the pine, so it will change really soon, just bear with me. But all you're doing with your green is you're drawing one central line. There we go. And around that central line you're just drawing a bunch of other lines that are kind of roughly at a 45-degree angle. And just like you did for the leaves, go ahead and create a new layer. We're gonna add just a little bit more pine that has a different color. So you can name this layer Pine 2. I don't know why I went with extra pine, but I don't know. And you're gonna pick a lighter version of your green. And really, you're just going to fill in some of the spots that still feel a little bit empty. So same technique, one main line and then some 45-degree angle lines all around it. And this is really the last chance that you have to fill in some gaps in your piece. So take the time to go over, zoom in, zoom out, and just make sure that everything looks good, because this is the last big elements that we're adding. Once you're happy with the general shape of your border, or corner in this case, go ahead and create a new layer that you're going to put on top of everything. And this one we're going to rename it to berries. And for the berries, go ahead and pick a nice cream color. And it's very simple, you're literally just drawing some circles. They tend to be located in the junction of your Y shape. So I like starting with that, just adding a little berry anytime that I have two branches that connect together. And then I just kind of look at where it would look good to add a few more. So sometimes they're not even touching a branch, they're just floating, but I think it looks good. And since it's a drawing, it doesn't matter, they don't have to be attached to a branch, you can just not listen to physics. And once you have your berries, just to be a little bit extra, go ahead and pick a darker version of your cream color and just add a little dot on one side of the berry to kind of, just add a little bit more detail in a very simple way. If you're drawing a corner just like me, a very easy way to do the other corner is to just swipe all your layers toward the right and then group them. And keeping the good habit of renaming your layer, you can also rename your group, so branches in this case. And then if you swipe it towards the left, you get the option to just duplicate it. And with the arrow tool, you can then just flip it on both sides and put it in the top. You can also use the distort tool to just kind of make it seem like it's not exactly the same thing, but basically you don't have to redraw it if you don't feel like it. That's a very easy way of just completing the other corner. And this is the point where if you want to add text, you totally can. So just create a new layer, rename it to text, and pick the color you want. I highly recommend just the same white or cream color. And I'm still staying with hard chalk. I just think it looks really good. And I'm really not great at calligraphy, but one hack that I found that kind of makes it look decent is you just draw regular cursive letters, but you add a lot of space between them. So I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but basically just your normal letters, but with really, really, really long lines in between them. And then you can go over and just thicken some parts of the letter to make it look a little bit more fancy. But honestly, I'm really bad at calligraphy, so if you're better than me, good for you, seriously. Make sure to share what you've created with me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, because I want to see something that looks good. But if you're not, and if you don't even want to mess with cursive, there are a few fonts that come with Procreate that can look really good. So another way to do that is just to add a text layer. And to do that, go in the tool icon at the top, in the add section, select add text. And if you click on the two little A's at the bottom, you're gonna have access to the style. And I think this Snell rounded font can look really good for something holiday related, as well as the copper plate. And they look really good together as well. I'll show you an example that I made. They just pair really well, basically. And it means you don't have to worry about your own handwriting, which, at least in my case, is definitely a plus. So this was how to draw some decorative mistletoe elements. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to give it a thumbs up because it really does help the channel. And last but not least, don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos every week.